Welcome to the virtual town hall that we are doing here live with Alexandra Deufel and Lisa Hermosillo. We're excited to do this. Obviously, originally we were intending for a debate to be on this night, and some things happened, which we'll briefly talk about. But first off, want to thank you for joining us and encourage you. If you have questions as we are doing this, please ask them. We'd love to hear your questions, and we will, as long as they're appropriate questions, we will relay them on to the candidates that we are chatting with today to get some live feedback on your question. So if there's one you've been hoping to ask them, right now is your chance. That being said, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I'm really glad you still had us on.
Absolutely.
So we can talk and just share a little bit more about what we want to do if we were elected. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So I want to kick this off nice and easy and just give you a couple minutes to introduce yourself, who Alexandra Deufel is, and why you're interested in running for District 40 House.
And I don't think I've done enough of that in my social media presence.
Yeah.
I'm originally from Germany, but I lived there a long time, like in 91, right? So it's been a long time. I've been more in North America. And I'm a professor at Minot State.
Okay.
So in Germany, I worked at health insurance, didn't like that, went to college, really liked that. And I ended up in Minot because I spent a lot of time in Calgary, Canada for my college. So I like the prairie people. I like the open sky. I really fell in love with that kind of place.
Right.
And after grad school, which was in Pennsylvania, and it was hot and humid and very different there, so I wanted to come to a northern tier, and I applied to jobs in Minnesota, Montana, Minot here, and so I was hired, and I said, I'll come to Minot. I can have horses here. So that's one of the things. I met my husband here. He's originally from D.C., from Washington, D.C.
Wow.
But he also came similar route. Went to Minnesota for his teaching degree. And so we have horses just north of the studio here, a couple of miles. And my husband does hay, so we have a hay business on the side. We have a bunch of apartment buildings in town, so we're landlords. We do a lot of our own construction. So we wear a lot of different hats.
You have a little bit going on.
Yeah, we have a lot going on. And why am I running for office? Well, I'm unhappy with the politics in North Dakota. It used to be really live and let live. If somebody didn't like you, they'd say, well, that's weird, or, that's different. You know the phrase.
Right,
well, that's different.
Yeah.
And that was it, But now they're trying to force you into their scheme and their family patterns and their way of life. And I just don't like that. I'm kind of a social libertarian, and I like the liberty part of it,
Right. Yeah.
Leave me be, and I'll leave you be, and that's that.
Yeah.
And I don't feel that's like that anymore. So, and I thought, well, finally, let's see.
This was the election cycle to do it. What prompted 2024 to be the year? Any particular reason?
I don't know. Trump coming back nationally. All this national politics is really filtering down to the states. And I see that I do a lot of stuff on social media, and it filters down, people talk about the national stuff way more than actually what happens at the state level. And sometimes I try to look, I'm running for the state here.
Right.
I'm not Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's just really tough to actually get people to talk about what's happening at the state level.
Right. So I mentioned it a little bit in the intro, and I'll give you a chance to respond to it. Obviously, we were hoping to have the debate happening today between you and your opponents, which would have been a great conversation to have. Unfortunately, due to miscommunication on our part, along with a couple other things, it did not happen like we were expecting it to happen. But what would be the thing that you were hoping that your constituents would be able to see from an environment like that?
I think it would be nice to have them actually have to answer tough questions.
Okay.
There was a little bit of spin on the point of Matt Ruby, thinking, with his kids in school, PTA, whatever, the parent-teacher conference or whatever it was. My only day I couldn't do it was October 8th, and that's the same day they couldn't do it either, because I sat right in the same room with them at Verendry at that event, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So my take is they really don't want to have this public discussion.
Yeah.
And they can say, no, that's not it, but in my mind, that's it. And so I would have liked to ask them, one of my big questions is when I go to the website, Mad Rubies in particular, there's talk about freedom and liberty.
Okay.
And I would love to ask him to his face, how do you square that personal liberty, that personal freedom with what you vote on and how you vote in the legislature about women's health, about trans kids, about all that stuff. That liberty should extend to women.
Right.
They should extend to every American, every North Dakotan living here. So that would have been my prime question for that entire group, like how they square that's those statements of liberty and personal responsibility, and then they vote the way they do when they're in the legislature. But I guess I don't get to do that.
So you have been having a campaign, and we were discussing a little bit beforehand all the fun activities you've been going on. Tell us a little bit. You guys been having events. You've been active on TikTok. It seemed like that's a great way to connect with the younger audience.
Yeah, I see my venue to the election not through the older people as much.
Yeah.
Even though connecting with the Minot Women's Network.
Yep.
There are a lot of women there. They're in their 70s, and they're like, I cannot believe I'm protesting this stuff again.
Yeah, wow.
Right? I mean, so they're out there. But there are a lot of young people that are politically not engaged. I think they don't think it matters.
Right.
They're defeated. The Gen Z people, they don't have the wealth of their parents. Their standard of living is going to be less than their parents. Where I still grew up at the tail end of where we're going to do better than our parents.
Right.
And those days are gone for a lot of younger people.
Yeah, you're right.
And they have to work a lot harder than we did. My parents, my dad was an engineer, my mom was a homemaker. And they had an upper middle class life with that.
Okay.
And now you look at the way people how hard they have to work to achieve that.
Yeah.
So I try to reach out to young people on TikTok.
Okay.
It keeps me sane. There's a lot of confirmation of the kind of views that I have in those people. What I don't know, how far does that transpire out?
Right.
So I don't have the sense, like, do those people exist here?
Right. Yep. That's hard to tell with the digital audience.
The digital audience is pretty much nationwide. Facebook, I've done outreach there, which is different, a very different demographic there. It skews much older overall.
Right, yeah.
More conservative overall. There's no content moderation on Facebook compared to TikTok.
Right, okay.
Like I tried to post a TikTok showing a sort of a movie cut or slideshow of all the really, really nasty comments I got on Facebook when I posted my first ad.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't say it out loud, the kind of stuff.
Wow.
And TikTok rejected that because it violated their community standards.
Interesting.
And Facebook, happily, they're all there for everyone to see. I eventually deleted that whole thing and just posted it again. And I'm doing more moderating.
That's interesting.
On that.
That's interesting.
So.
The digital platforms are sometimes difficult to navigate, and it seems like they're ever changing. What worked at the beginning of your campaign may not work now.
Exactly.
But obviously, in your campaign, there are some main issues that you have prioritized as you have been connecting with that younger audience and with all of Minot. What are maybe the three main issues?
Yeah, I don't even know if I can say three things. Overall, any of that culture war stuff, whatever color that comes in, if it's against women, against LGBTQ people, I would just try to push back on all of that. Even if I were elected, I mean, we wouldn't have an overwhelming majority of Democrats down there suddenly, right? So this stuff would still keep coming. I absolutely expect some kind of attempt at banning certain kinds of birth control because somebody decided that that's abortion because they don't know the science behind it. So that's one of my things I want to do. Economic diversity. I think we need to diversify. We're so commodities driven. So we're so the market up and down. The oil, I watch the oil every day.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty stable, which I like. We had I was here during the oil boom wild swings going up to over 110.
Yeah.
And I've seen it as low as 50.
Right.
Even in the 30s for a very short time, luckily. You know, and all that tax revenue from that, and how are we going to invest that? Because that windfall, I mean, this is golden.
Right.
This oil boom brought a lot of people, brought a lot of activity, and most of those are gone, but those wells are pumping, and they're bringing prosperity. And I'd like to direct some of that to hopefully expanding some more the rural areas, too, that are not in the Bakken. Lisa and I went to an event at the Souris Basin Region 2 event, where we heard a lot of good stuff about ranchers trying to do off-the-ranch meat sales.
Okay.
You know, there's a lot of involvement in that. Well, how do you make that happen at the state level, the regulations? They would really like to sell meat to the school systems, to the schools. Well, that's not, you know, the reimbursements for school lunches is minuscule compared to what they could use to produce their beef.
Okay.
So those would be things. Ranching in general, I'm really pro that area, ranching and ag, and see how we can get some more, really they're progressive ideas. You know, Mima's Meats was there to get local people involved in processing instead of just the big three meat processors.
Right.
So that's a big thing. I know it's less Minot related, but
yeah, but it's
you know, I would still in the legislature hope to push some of that forward. Childcare accessibility. It's another thing. The legislature did a lot in the last session, helping the parent end of it. There's a lot of really good reimbursement rates for childcare. And there was quite a bit of money to the centers in bigger cities for renovations and things like that. But what they've not addressed is the worker shortage.
Right.
So the poverty level workers in these childcare centers that's really what we have to figure out how to lift that up.
Makes sense.
In some way.
So there's a lot to dig in there, and we're going to, and I see Michelle has a question that we will get to about where you stand on a couple measures. We will talk about that in a minute. But there's a point that you put out in there, and I want to ask a question that prefaces it. So Minot is a fairly conservative town. As you have went down this, what does a path to election look like to you? And I guess it comes down to how are you able to connect, or why is there a voter that maybe is on the fence, votes Republican but would be fine voting Democrat? How do you connect with a voter like that? Why should they vote for Alexandra?
I think there are quite a few people out here who think the legislature has gone too far.
Yeah.
Because we have a supermajority, and supermajorities get this sort of circular thinking
right
after a while, and you see it in Democrats too. I mean, you hear lots of complaints about California.
Right.
Prime example. It's happening there with Democrats. They're only talking amongst each other. The ideas get more fringe when that happens, and that's what's happening here. And, you know, lots of people are conservatives, but they don't want to be told by a legislator how to live their life. So that freedom argument rings true. What also rings true with them is just economic stuff, you know.
Right.
The one of my ads is really, you know, the thing we used to have in the 50s, 40s, and 50s. You could have one guy, one father, be there as the breadwinner, and mom could stay home.
Yeah.
And people who want that life, they can't even have that anymore. Right.
It's difficult.
So I think we need to push to make that happen again. Higher wages. I mean, there's so much union bashing. Unions get wages up. No matter what else you think about them. And if they're reasonable all the time, sure, not always. But we have to have these conversations. Right. And if you never have that debate, it just gets crazier and crazier. And we're spiraling down, getting more with this extremism.
Yeah, makes sense. So along that, obviously you mentioned the supermajority that is held by the Republicans in Bismarck. If elected, how do you plan on working with that supermajority in order to perhaps enact some of the change that you're hoping to?
I think talking to people, and they're not all like that. I can tell when I'm talking to Republicans, I think there are quite a few in the legislature who would love to move on from the constant culture war. It's constant. And since we have a legislature that has to pick up and discuss every bill, we waste a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, in fact, I know there are people down there, people I talked to after that Warendry event.
Yeah.
You know, I'm glad somebody is saying these things.
Right.
They can't say it because they're Republicans.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm saying it because I feel I have nothing to lose on that front.
Yeah, it seems like it's a difficult thing, and you are in a good position there. All right, so I want to go and talk about some of the issues that you mentioned. So one of them is the economy and how families are hurting. It's difficult with a breadwinner. You have to have two people in the home working essentially. And there's a measure that came up. Michelle has referenced it on the chat of property for property tax.
Oh yeah,
ending property tax. Now, some would say that that ending property tax is going to help incomes in home because it puts money back in the pocket. And obviously there is another side to that argument that it would not help. So my question for you is, where do you stand on property tax? And do you see it as something that would help the homes, or is it going to cause more harm than good?
Clearly, property taxes are a big issue. And we need to try and address it again.
Yeah.
As a state, it's really high numbers. People are getting really high numbers.
Right.
And I'm really thinking about people on income that is not going up at the same rate.
Right.
Their house might be appreciating because the neighbors sold theirs for more money and their appreciation goes up. So something more needs to be done. But that's not an easy thing to fix.
No, it's not.
Anybody who tells you that just eliminating it will somehow magically fix that, you will be taxed. Mm-hmm. We need to buy those fire trucks. The fire trucks cost way more now.
Yeah.
You know, so when I hear this profligate spending, well, it's maybe there's some of that, right? Of course, there's always some spending that shouldn't be happening.
Right.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. There's definitely stuff that can be cut.
It's not an easy topic. And Dustin Garillo, I don't know how to say his name properly, but he did a really good deep dig in how many times the legislature has tried to fix property taxes.
Right.
And it's just, Democrats have tried it, Republicans have tried it.
Yeah.
I'm against Measure 4.
Okay.
So just coming out straight for that, the way that's done, no.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing something.
Right. Absolutely. That makes sense. Okay. So then if we're supposed to be doing something, what would be something that maybe you would be a fan of bringing to the legislature in the area of property tax? And I'll broaden it. What would be something, because we know families are hurting. It's child care is going up. Housing is becoming more unaffordable. You've already mentioned it. It's hard to live in a home with just one income. Groceries are going through the roof. Gas actually has maintained a little bit recently.
Stable,
that one seems pretty stable. But there's a lot of other areas that are definitely affecting pocketbooks. So what would be something that you would look at that maybe either would help individual things that I mentioned there, childcare, homes, whatever, or look at the big picture? Either way you want to take it. Take a look at that.
Gas, obviously, that's a commodity. We can't influence the gas prices. I know people say that all the time, but it doesn't matter how much gas we pump in North Dakota. It's pumped by people who sell that on the open market. Yeah. That's not our gas or our oil in that sense. It makes no difference.
Right.
And nationally, the president doesn't control gas prices either. If you have a commodity, the commodity prices direct that. What the Arabs are doing, what we're doing, all influences that commodity price. During the pandemic, of course, nobody was driving. Prices tanked.
Right.
Then everybody started picking up again, and the economy went through the roof. Prices go up, right? So gas, there's nothing our state legislature can do on gas.
Right.
Anybody who tells you they can get the gas prices down. And it's the same in groceries. Unless we break up some of these monopolies nationally, the food monopolies, the grocery prices are not going to change. What the farmer gets for the grain, that's not budging, right?
Right, yeah.
So it's not coming from the farmer.
Yeah.
So we can't tell the farmers, hey, why don't you sell us the grain cheaper?
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah.
So I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there what you can do at the state level about those things, grocery, and even housing. Housing is going to come down again as the rates are coming down. We just had a pretty decent rate cut as inflation is 2.4 now. So that's going to get cut again if that maintains, if it doesn't blip up again.
Yep.
And those housing prices, or at least the mortgage, what you pay for a mortgage is coming down.
Mm-hmm.
At the state level for housing, the only thing you could do is, which I don't know how much of that we have in North Dakota, the sort of zoning issues they have in some of the states where there's a big population. Well, don't build that low-income housing here, not by my house.
Yeah.
Not in my nice neighborhood. We have particularly here in Minot, we have really nice mixed housing stock. Mm-hmm. We could always have more, and I see developments going up. I don't know what the prices are on those homes.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a huge issue in Minot. I mean, with the oil boom, we got all these apartments. Mm-hmm. Why they're so expensive in some cases, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, we price our apartments fairly low.
Right.
But we have mostly older buildings from the 50s, the old stock. We maintain all of that, and we put dishwashers in and all that. But
well, it's interesting because $25 an hour a couple years ago was a decent pay.
I know.
And now you can barely get by on that.
Yep.
And that comes down to some of the housing and stuff like that that keeps on going up. So is there something that needs to be done from the state, either, property tax, I think everybody agrees there needs to be reform. Mm-hmm. Perhaps Measure 4 is not the way. You were saying it's not. Child care. There's ideas on that. Is there something that the state can do with childcare that you would look to have done? There
needs to be something on the worker side of childcare somehow. They're just like a smidge over the national poverty level. So, we're talking like 24,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Try living on that, right?
Yeah,
so
right,
that's
you
just
can't.
a side job for a family. So I see people going into childcare because they have a child. A lot of centers, the way they attract childcare workers is, well, you can bring yours.
Yeah. Right.
So I don't know if eventually, paying parents more will filter down so the centers can afford more. But we also, the centers are doing well in comparison to the small towns.
Okay.
Small towns don't need a daycare center. They usually have in-home daycares with maybe a couple of women getting together and doing that. Well, there's almost nothing to help them.
Right.
All that help from the last session was more geared for the big guys. Mm-hmm. They're in the big towns. And a lot of that went to renovating, getting new carpet and those kind of things. Ate up a lot of that money, and a lot of it was requiring, like a match, you getting this grant if you bring the match. Well, they're not going to get $100,000 in Velva as a match to get their daycare rehab, So there were a lot of weird things attached to that.
Right.
So we need to look at it again. Where you find the workers, even with the higher pay, I mean, you see that around everywhere, right? Worker shortage.
Right. So on worker shortage, there's like two sides you can look at this. Mm-hmm. One, higher pay will see more workers. Two, do you feel like there has been, for whatever factors, that there's less of a generation coming up, not as many people coming up, and so then that takes an effect on how many workers are in the workforce to fill out some of these jobs? Because I think we could agree that maybe McDonald's is not a career. No. I mean, if you're at a manager level, there's certain places, right? But that's not what we're talking about. No. It's not a career job. And so how can they pay where somebody can be sustainable off that? That's a difficult thing.
Yeah. I mean, a childcare worker, I'm sure a lot of them would like to do that for many years. Yeah. If they could afford to.
Right.
And not like McDonald's.
Yeah.
But if they get paid more at McDonald's, how do you compete with that?
Right.
So it's a challenge.
It's definitely a challenge.
We need to keep our people in the state. Too many are looking to leave.
Okay.
I talk to young 20-year-olds all day, every day.
Yeah, you do.
And that's what I hear. Can't wait to get out of here. Can't wait to get out. It's the repressive cultural climate, and not a lot of prospects for good jobs.
Okay. Yeah.
And childcare worker is not a good job now.
Right.
They don't have benefits. Nowadays, you get benefits at McDonald's. you know?
Yep.
So trying to compete with that. I think we need to be more welcoming overall, and the boogeyman immigrants.
Okay.
I think at some point we need to go there. Overall, populations are declining worldwide pretty soon.
Yep.
I just read an article that there'll be we're going to max out globally sometime in 2040s, 2050s, and then globally will decline. And all these Western countries are declining already.
Right.
So it's a competition for those people, and there'll be more automation eventually.
Right, there will be
which you
that.
can't do in childcare. So, I mean, I don't have the magic wand, you know, the recipe. I'm not a politician, so I'm not going to tell you, I know how to fix it.
Yeah.
But we need to have those conversations desperately.
Absolutely.
To continue that.
Let's talk about a heavily converse subject, and that is that of abortion.
Oh, yeah.
So first off, I'll just let you give your where you stand on that subject of abortion.
Yeah, I think the way we had it with Roe Wade was workable.
Okay.
I think that's why a lot of the people on the left didn't really organize to try and make that more liberal in some way, even though there are a few people that felt that was too much.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those. And then it was a little bit of a sort of a broadside, I think, to the left when that fell at the Supreme Court.
Right.
I don't think anybody thought that would really happen.
Right.
A 50-year precedent to fall like that, because everybody, you know, knows the fallout of something like that. I mean, we saw it when they finally allowed abortion in Ireland. I mean, how many dead bodies of dead women does it take, right? In South America, same thing. So now we go backwards in that. Nobody expected it on the left, really. Not really. And that's why there was not that much pushback, I think, in the States when this stuff, well, we got Roe, right? Yeah. So to me, it's just a kind of a flabbergasting. I can't believe that there are people out there who feel it's their place to tell me what I can do with my body until viability. Once you can do a C-section and that baby can survive, and I'm cured from whatever condition, you know, that was causing the high blood pressure or whatnot, through the roof, strokes, sepsis. Until that point, that is not your job as a legislator, as a church. And people forget that, you know, we're not saying you must have an abortion.
Right.
That's why we're pro-choice. If you are having your water break at 15, 16 weeks, and I'm sorry, I have to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, that's fine.
And that is too young for that baby to survive outside of the womb. You have the choice to wait until that heartbeat is gone and you're severely septic and you might die, but you have that choice. Nobody's ever going to, in the hospital, say, you must abort that baby.
Right.
But if I want to preserve my fertility to try again, if I have kids at home who rely on me already, I need to have that choice. And it's always presented as this really black and white issue, and it's not. You can't legislate every little instance. They tried to fix some of these really strict, you know, like doctors have to go to the list. Well, here it's allowed. And how high does your fever have to be?
Right.
A doctor needs to decide that, not some panel. Maybe he has to go talk to the lawyer at the hospital. Is this woman sick enough? Can we do it? It's bad enough that they can't access this care at the Catholic hospitals, which are spreading everywhere. So, you know, it's amazing to me that there are people out there who feel they should make women wards of the state as soon as you become pregnant. I also don't agree with these 6-week exceptions. For rape and incest. That's not a workable exception. You think about a 10-year-old who's raped by an uncle. When is she going to know that she's pregnant?
Yeah.
They don't have regular periods. And that 6 week is over 2 weeks after a missed period. Well, if that's not a regular period, you don't even have those 2 weeks. And if it's a older gal, 2 week regular periods. Let's say she has regular periods. Oh, I missed my period. Then she has 2 weeks to prove by law this was the result of rape, or this is the result of incest. So that is not an exception. They presented it as an exception. Oh, rape, incest, we have any exceptions. It's not. And it's not for the health of the woman if you have to talk to the lawyer, and doctors can't just make the decision there in the room right there. And if you don't believe in abortion, don't have one. That's just that simple. And to me, it's inflicting religion of one kind onto the rest of the population.
Yep. So you mentioned basically medical reason for abortion, and you mentioned an extreme, but that happens. I'm not diminishing that for abortion. What about somebody that is pregnant and just decides, you know what, I don't want to go forward with this? Should abortion also be allowable in that sense as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all early. The most cases are economical. The vast majority have kids at home, can't afford another one. So if you want to lower those, do something for families, because banning abortion does nothing for families.
Right.
Family leave, family health care, do something about domestic violence. That's just what it is. But making women slaves of the government, I'm not in favor in any instance.
And then one last question on that, we'll move on, because I think this is an argument that gets brought up. On the other hand, at what point do you feel that and I think you already kind of referred to it, but I want to go back to it, that the baby, the infant, whatever you want to term it as, begins to have some rights as far as being protected?
I think viability is still, and that's a moving target.
Yeah.
Because the way it's often presented, nobody's going to go 15 weeks and then suddenly decide, oops, I'm going to have an abortion.
Okay.
I mean, that's presented as the shock value, right? I mean, yeah, if you dig long enough, you probably find some.
Yeah.
But that's not reality in most cases.
Very good. We will move to a different topic, and that is Measure 2. So Measure 2 is a measure that will change how constitutional amendments can be brought to the ballot. So, for instance, we're having a constitutional amendment. Well, we're having an initiated measure that's being brought about in November, this property tax one.
Yep.
I think it's a perfect example, and I've mentioned it before, of how this process should work, in that there's a local person that got frustrated with property taxes, got all the signatures, and got it on the ballot, and now it's time for the people to decide whether or not they agree with it. And that's great. The process worked how it should. This would go and make that process a little more strict. Where it would increase the amount of signatures that'd be needed, and it would make it have to go to the ballot multiple times in order for it to be approved. How do you stand on Measure 2?
And the one subject thing, that
right. Yep.
the legislature decides if that's one subject, not the people bringing the measure. No, I'm not in favor of that either. It's just they tried this many times before. It's not the first time this is coming. They don't like that the people can bring stuff that they don't like down there. Right. The ethics measure. This Measure 4 wouldn't exist. The medical marijuana wouldn't exist.
Right.
Now there's a recreational measure that wouldn't exist. We need that accessibility to bring measures. And so I don't know why they're against it. Direct democracy, baby.
Yeah. So this doesn't affect today, but how do you feel about term limits, which was something else that put pressure on the legislature?
I voted for that.
Okay.
I knew it wasn't really going to fly constitutionally.
Yeah, right.
So, but I thought, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Overall, I guess constitutionally we can't force them to nationally.
Right.
I wanted more nationally than anything
Yeah,
else.
right, yeah. I think so.
It's just too many old people over there. I mean, it's just... But here in the state, too, why not? I mean, you can still run twice in the House and twice in the Senate. That's enough.
Right.
Let somebody else do it. A lot of the Democrats were against it because they're afraid they can't find enough people to run.
Yeah.
Look at me. I'm the only one in 40.
Right.
So we really need to rebuild
Yeah.
the party, but that's no reason to say, well, let's let this person be there forevermore.
Right.
And that really creates the corruption. That's one thing the supermajorities are also really good at. It creates this corruption circle too. Mm-hmm. There's too much of that, and did they not like their ethics measure.
Yeah.
And I'm still waiting for some real change to come from that.
I think you can make an argument that while I can see how it hurt the Democrats, I think it also helps potentially the Democrats as well, because I think the Republicans are going to have trouble getting quality candidates as well. It's a lot of sacrifice.
It is.
The sacrifice that you're making is a lot. It's huge. All right, one more measure to go over, and that is we're not going over all five, just three of them that we picked out. The third measure we want to go over is measure number 5, which is the use of recreational marijuana, making that legal in North Dakota. Where do you stand on this?
I'll vote for that this time. I actually read the whole thing.
Okay.
They did a really good job of putting stuff in there that I wanted to see, because I've been to some states where it's everywhere. You can't walk down the street and you're just hit in the face with the smoke and the smell, which I don't particularly like.
Yeah.
But in our measure, it has in there all kinds of, not in public.
Okay.
It has age limits. It has limits how much you can have with what kind. I don't even know some of the stuff, what they're talking about with these edibles and tonics. Right. And
yeah.
I don't partake in those things. But for me, it's a basic freedom issue. Again, if you're not hurting anyone, you should be able to do what you want.
Absolutely.
So that, to me, falls under another one of those personal freedom
yeah.
things. And the way they wrote it, I think, is really pretty decent.
Very good. Okay, going to, and maybe this ties in with marijuana, so make the argument. I saw a billboard that said, vote measure 5, vote yes on measure 5 for economic development. A very unique approach on that marketing scheme. But you mentioned that Minot needs to diversify the economic sources that it has, that we're very caught up in commodities such as oil and gas and farm. What would be some ways that Minot could work on diversifying that?
We have a really vibrant small business community, and I think they're hurting from sort of a one-size-fits-all regulation scheme.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would really like to look into what they need and ask them what, if I were elected, I would want to reach out and what do you need that feels as oppressive reporting requirements, whatever that might be, and grow our small businesses. And we need to do something to help our grocery stores in the rural areas compete. I know some states have made it easier to have people that sort of shop for a whole host of grocery stores and bring prices down because they can buy it more in bulk.
Okay.
And then they go to Drake and they go to Velva and they go to those towns and help those survive. So that kind of stuff. The IT business would be nice to bring that out here more. We're getting these data centers.
Right.
So that's not really job creation.
Yeah, it's automation at work.
They suck us dry with energy if we're not careful. So
yeah,
I think the some of our county commissions are a little bit caught on the wrong foot there with regulation. Some people having these things next to their place.
Right. Very good. All right. Well, we answered the questions that were asked in the comments. So I want to leave with one last question for you. And that is, well, I think it's one last question. Might spur a couple more, but we'll see. But in closing, November 5, obviously, going to be election day. Big day, November 5th. And I think it'd be fair to say that if you were elected in, there would be a fair amount of change that would happen in District 40 compared to what they're used to. Already, there will be some change no matter what, as the former legislature declared he wasn't running, and then he did pass away. Why should voters initiate that change?
To get some different voices down there.
Yeah.
Just get somebody down there who will raise their hand and say, wait a minute, are you sure? Do you really want to go there? I think more voices is good.
Right.
And I think they should vote for me because I'm not going to be an extremist. They might think my abortion stance is an extremist, but that I'm one voice down there, right? I'm one voice who said, think about the women
right,
a little bit too, and make it more so they can have kids financially. Think about that side. When I look at Matt Ruby in my district, his voting record, it's all against family. Like no wage increases, no child tax credit, no family leave, no. But yes on punishing physicians if they give you an abortion, yes on all these abortion things, do that part where it makes the women actually and the families have more kids if they want to.
Right.
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
So I'll be one voice among many, and I'm hoping to just get more conversations started.
Absolutely. Well, we love starting conversations here. If somebody wants to, I know you've already done this when we did our one-on-one podcast, but if someone wants to learn more about what you have going on, what would be the best place for them to go?
TikTok. If you have TikTok, find me there.
Yeah.
I'm more radical on TikTok. So I'm speaking to younger people. So if you really want to know how I feel, go to TikTok.
Very good.
If you want the politician voice, go to Facebook. I'm much more moderate there.
Yeah.
But my voice is the same, really. Right. I'm just me, I'm just trying here. I'm not a politician, really. So this is what you get, and this is how I'll be down there.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to be any different.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you joining us for this.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you having us still on, even though it's just us now.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to go to a quick break, and then after the break, we'll be with Lisa Hermosillo, the District 38 House candidate. Do appreciate you watching. Go grab some popcorn, get another drink, whatever it is. We got about 45 more minutes of this, so... And we are back. This time we are joined by Lisa Hermosillo, District 38 House candidate. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, John, for having me.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys coming on. It was a good discussion that we had. I'm excited for this part. So again, just let's open it up, give you a couple minutes to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Lisa Hermosillo, and I am running for the North Dakota House of Representatives in District 38. I originally was from Minnesota. I grew up in Minnesota on a farm. I have 4 other siblings, and after high school, I found my way to Kansas for 2 years. I was at the time pursuing a social work degree, and then I moved to Colorado, and then the military life brought our family to Wyoming and then to North Dakota.
Wow.
So I've been in North Dakota now since August of 2020. And since then, I did change my decision with my degree, and I decided to go to the psychology route. And I don't know what kind of questions are going to be asked later, but there's a lot of reasoning behind going to the psychology side of things, and a lot of the advocacy and the work that I've done over the last couple of years really tied well into that.
Yeah.
I've got 5 kids.
I think one of them said, "Go mom." Wyatt.
Oh, really?
Go Wyatt. He's supporting mom today.
Oh, love you, buddy. Yeah, so that I obviously that takes a lot of my time, and I absolutely love being a mother. It's been the best thing that's ever happened to me. So
very cool. And obviously we addressed this before on the 40 side, but on the 38 side, hoping to have a debate with the Republicans, and in what has now become a well-documented saga, the Republicans did decline to have that debate for the District 38 on the District 38 side. Do you have anything that you want to say in regards to that? I'll give you an open floor to comment however you want.
Sure. Well, as a first-time candidate, you hear about debates happening. You see them, you watch them, and it's something that you kind of expect to happen. And so, honestly, I was really looking forward to that opportunity. I think it brings a lot of engagement to the community, gets them involved in politics. It allows them that opportunity to get to know their candidates and to see them have that back and forth between them. I think that's really crucial, especially for a lot of the topics that our voters feel very passionately about. So, yes, I was very disappointed that they declined to do that. That was even pre-primary as well. They declined a debate then, and then now they declined it again. And to me, I think it's just, what are you role modeling in that sense? If you're not willing to sit down and talk with your voters, allow them to ask you questions, and to give them that opportunity to see where you stand on issues, doesn't look very good on you, especially for incumbents who have been in there for a while. To me, I feel like a debate should be relatively easy for them to do. That's a great time for them to defend their values, defend what they believe in. And if you're not willing to do that, it really makes me wonder, what are they not willing to do when they are serving? And I hope that maybe they'll change their mind. I know we're getting down to the wire now, so it probably won't really happen. But it's I just really felt like that was a great opportunity that's now missed. And I feel like, again, as a brand new candidate, I was willing to do that. And I did reach out to the Chamber EDC because I felt like, well, I don't see a lot of initiation with these debates. So I thought maybe if they heard from a candidate, that maybe that would give them a little bit more of a push and motivation to do it. And they declined that as well, which is okay. I know they do more of your nonpartisan races. And so I just thought maybe that would maybe spark some interest in the future. So.
Absolutely. All right. About you, though. This is obviously your first time that you're running, and that's probably been a whole experience. We'll talk about that. But what was the main reason that spurred you into this decision?
Well, honestly, I've had a lot of interest even at a young age in politics. My parents noticed that at a very young age. I was the child that would come home from the library, school library, with books about politicians and government. And I remember at one point my favorite politician at the time was reading about was George W. Bush. And my parents could tell at that time, even with my personality and the way that I carried myself, that I was always looking for ways to help people. And I was the one that would speak up and in situations that were maybe not so easy. And they said, wow, Lisa, you have a gift. And that is that you care about people and you lead with empathy. And over the years, life, and, with family and kids and going back to school, I kept thinking, okay, when am I going to do this? When is the right time? And then with my demonstration back in November of last year, that took a lot of courage and guts to do that. And I guess in that moment, I realized the longer I wait, the more opportunities I'm going to miss. And so I just realized if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it now. And I don't regret it. I'm so glad that I did. And, but yeah, it's like you mentioned, it's been a great experience doing this for the first time.
And that demonstration that you're mentioning, that was when you stood on the Broadway Bridge in support for some mental health awareness. That was stuff that was going on at the base, right?
Yes.
Did you receive a lot of feedback from that?
I did. I got a lot of support from people because it is one of those topics that doesn't get talked about a lot, and it kind of gets brushed under the rug. And I thought, my goodness, we lost 3 airmen in 3 weeks.
Right.
And nobody in the community knew about it. And so when I was out on that bridge, I had a Trinity ER nurse stop in the middle of the road to talk to me.
Wow.
And she said, I am so glad that you're doing this because I see airmen weekly who are attempting, and the fear in their eyes to be found out that they need that help, or felt like that was their last result. They said nobody hears about it, and that's an issue. So, and of course I did have some people that weren't too happy about it because they don't like when the base is spotlighted in a negative way. But to me, this is an opportunity for actually us to come together. Yeah. And so that was the main intention behind my demonstration.
Interesting. Do want to encourage our viewers, if you are watching this and you have a question for Lisa, leave it in the comments. If it's appropriate, we will go ahead and ask that question. All right, so let's start here as we jump into the issues. Top 3 issues of why you're running.
Well, women's reproductive rights, that's my number one issue that I am very passionate about. And as I'm going door knocking, I'm hearing that from voters as well, that they just feel like the extreme measures that we've been going after women with on this is gone too far. And the choice is being taken away as well. And there's just not a lot of leeway with, I know that the 6 weeks is just, it's not enough time. There's too many times where every woman is different. So when people want to talk about, well, there are symptoms, they'll know that they're pregnant. Well, that could be different from woman to woman. And so the 6 weeks, I feel like, is just not enough time. I would like to see that bumped up to anywhere between 10 and 12 weeks. There's got to be some type of a happy medium that we can find there. But just seeing how that's impacting women. We all know a woman that has a story of life-threatening story. And it's when you hear these stories, you can't help but just try and put yourselves in their shoes and just realize what kind of an impact that has had on them, and to watch other women go through that. So
what, obviously we talked about abortion, and it's something that gets talked about a lot. What is the, two questions here. First off, what is your view on abortion? When is it allowed and when is it not allowed? And then secondly, it probably answers both. How is the perfect abortion law in place? Or should there be any abortion laws?
Well, I would say, number one, rape and incest is a boundary for me. Okay. When that happens, there's not enough consideration for the amount of trauma that a person has put through that. And to force a young child go through that. Their bodies are not meant for that, and it can cause a lot of damage to them. And so, yeah, rape and incest would be a boundary for me. I could not support anything, a pregnancy and a result of that. And then I would say, as far as a law put into place, like I said, I would say probably between 8 and maybe 12 weeks max. Right now, the law right now is, set at that 6 weeks, but it's not productive. It's still hurting women, and I don't think that's a good idea. And then right now we have in 38 at least, we have a representative that is saying, well, I'm against forced abortions. Well, no one wants forced abortions. That's not right. So everyone would agree on that on both sides. But he's also for not allowing women to have that choice. And I feel like that kind of contradicts itself in a sense, because if you're not for a person to choose to have a pregnancy, but you're not really wanting to punish when it's a rape, then I have a problem with that. And I think that's where I come in here saying, hey, things have gone too far. I want to change this, and we need to definitely take a look at changing what the law is right now. And I know that the ban right now is overturned, but that's more than likely going to be a temporary thing. So I don't want us to rely on that. But I support women's reproductive rights. I don't want to come out and say I'm for abortions. I don't think that should be, used as contraceptive measures. I don't think that should be the first choice. But we need to make sure that we're allowing women as much information and that freedom as possible.
Very good. So, obviously, we were going through your top 3 issues, and reproductive rights, women's reproductive rights was the number one. We didn't get to the other 2. We'll go back to the other 2 in a minute. But say you do get elected, and so we're going to take on abortion. How are you going to, and whether it's abortion or it's another topic, how are you going to work with a supermajority on getting some of these ideas actually put into law?
Well, I think I've proven through my campaign, and well before I even decided to run for office, that I am a moderate candidate. I strive to see both sides of everything, and to see values. And I think maybe that might upset some people, but we have to find common ground, and there is common ground if we actually take the time to be open-minded, to listen, and not just hear one thing and just completely shut down and choose not to work with them. When you're elected, voters have the expectation that you are going to be able to work with people that have different ideas than you and different opinions. And I know that I have support from both sides, Democrats and Republicans, and it's because of the way that I carry myself, the way that I present myself, and that I don't exclude myself from having conversations with Republicans. In fact, I love to have conversations with them, because it's interesting to get their side of things and to see mine, and try to find that common ground. So I feel like I would be able to go in there and work with everybody and keep those relationships very cordial and respectful, but also be assertive and still stand by my values.
And you've had to kind of perhaps sometimes encounter constituents of different views, as you've done a lot of door knocking, I heard?
Absolutely, yes.
How many doors have you knocked?
I have knocked over 2,500 houses. And that is from the first day that I door knocked was back in February.
Wow.
So I didn't just start doing this 2 weeks ago, 2 days ago with the election coming up. I have been doing this from day one, and I couldn't have done it with a number of people that have stepped up to help me with that. In 3 days, we had over 400 houses. And so I just feel like that is showing the level of dedication and motivation that I have to win this, and to honestly, door knocking has been my favorite part of campaigning by far. Just getting out there, talking to them. I think it takes a lot of courage for voters to talk to literally a complete stranger and open up and tell them about issues and what's impacting their family. And they're putting a lot of trust into you. Right. So when you're elected, they want to know that you are going to represent them, you are going to support them, and to remember what they have talked to you about.
So as you have had those conversations with constituents, what are some of the priorities that you've heard them talk about?
Surprisingly, and this is from both sides and independents, is women's reproductive rights.
Interesting.
And going into that, I was not expecting that, to be honest. But women's reproductive rights, inflation, childcare has been a big issue, and rights of males when it comes to custody and family issues and the criminal justice side of things as well. So I've heard that quite a bit, which sparked a lot of interest in me to research and look into that a lot more as well. So those are some of the main points that I've heard from voters.
All right. So we talked about point number 1 for your issues. Give me a second issue.
My second issue is mental health. It's
surprise.
Yeah. I have personal stories and experience with depression, and I know what it's like to go through dark times. And I have always been a person that a lot of people can come to and talk to when they are going through hardships. And I think it's because I've been so open and transparent about my life. I think it proves that I'm very, I guess, not afraid to share my story. And in doing so, you find ways that you relate to other people and they can confide in you. And so, again, another reason why I decided to get my degree in psychology was because a lot of the work that I've done with veterans. When I worked at the Department of Veterans Affairs, I really developed very close relationships with vets. And it made me want to go outside of that. So I spent a lot of time with homeless vets, and the pattern of drug usage, alcohol addiction. I wanted to learn more about it because, to be honest, I was very ignorant about addictions. And it really changed my perspective on it. And I wanted to learn about the biological side of things, the science behind it, so that, and I think that's really helped me and changed my views on it, and to kind of apply it to Minot, we do have a mental health issue, and that's not just here, it's nationwide. And I just feel like that it's just not something that we touch a lot on. And I think if we could tackle the mental health, we'd see a lot of community issues go down. We'd see addiction rates go down, crime go down. And so, yeah, that is obviously a very passionate topic for me. So,
right. Yeah. Well, I think anybody that does the demonstration that you did, and demonstration, I think that word sometimes is used negatively. It was not a negative demonstration. It was intended to be a positive one. Kind of shows how much you do care about mental health. Point number 3, first off, before we go to point number 3, is there any legislative measures that you plan to take that you have in the back of your mind that you'd like to see that would help with mental health?
I would just say I want to make sure that we have adequate funding for our behavioral health facilities. In terms of, right now we see kind of issues with our facilities being able to have enough workers, or their caseload is too high. And so if we can find ways to bring people on board to get those degrees, to want to work in mental health, and make sure that we're paying them well, and even the transfer of licensing as well. We're talking about workforce and shortages of workers. If we can try and do what we can to get licenses to carry over, I think that would bring a lot more people over to North Dakota, knowing that I don't have to go and get relicensed. I don't have to do, all these check boxes. So that would be one thing that I would want to make sure, is that we're constantly making sure that funding is stabilized.
Issue number 3.
Number 3, childcare.
Okay.
Childcare is, again, another kind of a personal topic for me as well. I am a mother, and I have had to make that difficult decision to stay home because childcare was either too expensive or wait times were way too long. We see that issue out at the base with the CDC and FCC providers. There's just not enough workers. And it's hurting the ability for women and men, because it does predominantly affect women, but there are men that stay home. And so I don't want men to feel like they're left out of this, because I think a lot of times people just think it's the woman's place to be home and raise kids, but that's not the same situation for every family.
Yeah.
But it is hurting the workforce. It's hurting, we've talked about childcare, salaries not being enough. So if we can find a way to get people who are interested in childcare to maybe start their own business to help fill that void, fill that gap, I think we would see a good change in that. And I think we'd see more people willing to get out into the workforce, because seeing people having to make that decision is really tough. And I've been there, done that. And I just wish that people would be a little bit more empathetic towards that, and to understand that sometimes people just don't have the choice.
So to encourage someone to start their own childcare business, obviously there's licensure that has to happen. There's risk because of starting your own business, and
Sure.
facilities, and maybe they can do it in their house. It depends on the licensing and all that. What would be a path that would help encourage that could happen through the legislature?
Well, I think we could look at covering maybe like a package where we could help with startup fees. We could start with loans or something to get them by, to get their foot in the door. Sorry, to just help get them started. I think that would be a huge help that way, because I think a lot of people, that kind of deters them a little bit when they think about the licensing or how much it's going to cost. They may not have that up front, and they'd be phenomenal childcare workers, but there's things that kind of keep them from doing that. And I think obviously we need a lot more appreciation for our childcare workers, because it's not an easy job. I even did that for a while when I was home. So I would watch kids, and but again, it's very, very fulfilling as well. So
right, yeah. I mean, I love my kids, and it's still it's not pain, a struggle to watch them sometimes. So
right.
So the struggle to watch other people's kids, it can increase.
Right.
It takes a lot of patience for childcare workers.
Absolutely.
Is my point. All right. So we understand that we live in an economy that it just seems like everything under the sun is going up in price right now.
Yes.
And you mentioned that a concern for some of your constituents was inflation. Obviously, that's probably not something we're going to address directly through the North Dakota state legislature, but there can be some things that help families get by. Is there anything, whether it's a certain thing, you mentioned childcare workers, but obviously it's expensive for families. Is there something specific that you're passionate about, whether it's affordable housing, grocery bills, whatever it might be, that you kind of have a solution or something in the back of your mind that might help some families that are struggling?
Well, first off, I would love to see minimum wage go up.
Okay.
I think that would be a huge help for families. $7.25 in this economy right now is absolutely, it's unbelievable that we're still at $7.25. I don't agree with it. I think it's hurting families even more. And so I know that's been addressed at the last session, and that was not passed. It was shot down. And I really struggle to understand why. Mm-hmm. People cannot live off of that type of an income and expect to thrive and expect to get into better housing like we were talking about. So yeah, low-income housing is also another big issue. We have where people either make too much or make too little, and they're kind of like, there's a lot of people stuck in the middle. Right. And so yes, affordable housing, minimum wage increase, and then something to help with groceries. Yes, I would love to see something like that, only because yes, the prices have skyrocketed, and if we want to have people be able to provide for their families when they can't, or their grocery bills have tripled. Right. We have, I know at one of the town halls that we had a woman who spoke up. She's a military spouse, and saying that their family is struggling so much just to provide for their family with groceries. Wow. And I think that's just, again, something that a lot of people don't think about. There's a lot of people racking up debt just to afford groceries, and just, living expenses. Yes. So it's hurting everybody.
So one of the things I'll segue, and it's not intended to be a setup.
Sure.
Okay. We're not trying to trap you today.
Sure.
But one of the things in the measures that will be on the ballot is measure 4, the property tax measure, right?
Yeah.
And so this would get rid of property tax. In theory, it could potentially put money back in homeowners' pockets. And I understand that there's a lot of other things it could do. And their taxes still could be placed just on a different basis instead of an assessed value. What is your view on Measure 4?
I do not support it. I don't think there's a solid, substantiated plan, a long-term plan. One, I think there's a lot of misconceptions with this one. People thinking that it's going to be cash on hand is simply not what's going to happen. There is going to be an increase either way that you look at it. And like you mentioned, it may not be based off of assessed value. It could be square footage. It could be land. It could be, it's going to be something else. I think relying on the legacy fund is not going to be as effective, and it's not going to work, pan out like people are thinking it's going to. One idea that I kind of have been doing some research on is kind of to mirror what the state of Alaska does with their permanent fund dividend. And what they do, because again, they have a huge oil industry there, so they get quite a bit of revenue from that, just as North Dakota does. But what they actually do is they issue checks directly to Alaskans. And so it's based off of the prior year and how successful oil extraction was. But when people are talking about money going straight back to families, I think there's a little bit of government overreach there when we keep asking the state legislature, okay, what does a rainy day mean to you? What is going to warrant you to start giving the money back? So I would like to see maybe, I don't know, something close to what Alaska does, because I think it's going to work. I think it's now you have people that can decide where they're going to put that money, and when they spend that money, it's going to be put directly back into our economy. And they're not. I think it's unfair for the state legislature to decide when a family is having their quote unquote rainy day. Hardships and difficulties that families are facing are going to be different, and so I would like to see checks going back to the families directly, because again, that rainy day could be 5-10 years from now. And I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions with measure number 4. And again, the risk of the funding that's going to be lost to our fire departments, law enforcement, our school, that really worries me, and that really does concern me. I don't feel like it's going to be fair for now our rural areas and smaller cities to compete with Fargo or Grand Forks, and the state legislature is now going to be able to say, or basically yay or nay it, and say, no, we'll give you money for this or we're not. I don't think that people are seeing the fine detail in this measure. So if further down the road, if they come up with a plan that secures and protects the funding to these community services, then maybe I would look at supporting that. But right now, I wouldn't support it.
Do you feel like property tax is a problem in North Dakota?
Absolutely. I think it's way too high. I personally think we should start with a reduction, and then we need to cap it, because I think that's going to be the compromise that could maybe be the solution. Is I do agree it's way too high. I don't think it's fair for our senior citizens to worry about losing their homes after a lifetime of working to where they got to enjoy retirement, not worry about losing their home. I think maybe the only compromise I could think about with complete elimination, because let's be honest, it's not complete elimination, but would be to cap it and make sure that 65 and up don't pay property taxes, something, or people on fixed incomes. But I don't think that just completely taking it away. I think it's really impulsive. I think it's going to cause, when our the session begins, our state legislatures are going to be focused on that, because it's going to be, frantically trying to figure out what are we going to do with this, versus addressing all the bills, which from what I hear, there's quite a bit going through already right now. So I just want them to be able to have enough time to. So
the property tax is something that's come up property tax is something that has come up several times
Yes.
in the legislature and has gotten voted down many times.
Yep.
So if the constitutional or the initiative measure doesn't pass, what's your optimism on the legislature actually getting some type of reform, whether it's checks back to the people or whether it is capping, making a primary tax, a permanent primary residence tax credit? Do you have good optimism on that?
I really don't. I think it's going to be very complex. I mean, this whole topic is very complicated.
It is.
There's no simple answer or solution to this. I think the check would be a better option, because now we're not having the whole state trying to come together and mutually decide this is where we want the money to go, or this is what we want to have happen. There's too many opinions out there, and it just kind of ends up getting even more complicated and messy that way. So, if it's in the form of a check, I from people that I've talked to, they seem to be really on board with that. They've lived in Alaska and they've seen the process, and they said, it was actually pretty neat. And I think a lot of Alaskans were very thankful for that, because if they're talking about wanting the residents to actually partake into that legacy fund, I think what better way than to give them the power and the decision to get that money in hand. It's tangible, they have it, and then they can do as they want with it. There's
a couple other interesting measures on the ballot. Measure 2 changes how constitutional amendments work. It will become a little bit more difficult to get an initiated measure on the ballot, increase the signature count, and also make it go before the citizens of North Dakota 2 times to be voted on. What's your view on that measure?
I don't support it. I'm going to be voting against it. Again, going back to power of the people, for the people. It takes a lot of work, and I'll give credit to everyone that it's sponsored and helped with Measure 4. That was a lot of time, a lot of commitment, and a lot of effort. And so I wish people would maybe appreciate that a little bit more, and to increase that. Just think about how much more work that's going to be. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it should be made more complicated for people to initiate these measures. If they've done the work, they've got the signatures. I think we need to leave it. I do not support that.
So you mentioned power of the people. How did you feel about term limits?
Term limits, I actually support. Okay. That is one thing that Christina Wolf, my opponent in 38, agree on. I think that it is going to be bringing in a influx of brand new people, new ideas, new perspectives, and hopefully get people that get interest in wanting to run, because when you're running up against an incumbent, it is very difficult.
It is. You feel that?
Oh, yeah. But I think it's going to be, it's actually going to help the people in the legislature to kind of, I think it's going to bring people a little bit more together, because they're going to be like, okay, we have new people in here. They're going to maybe find some mentorship through that, instead of you have an incumbent and they're like, oh, they already know the process. We don't really need to do anything or talk to them about any of this. But I really do support it. I think it's important to give other people that chance. And there's other ways, once you've served your time, to serve your community. So it's not like you can't do great things, you can't continue to help others. It's just, I do feel like there's a point where, when someone's in there 20, 30 years, like, what good is that really doing? Are their values and their perspectives changing with the changing times? Or are they voting consistently with what was 20 years ago? So, no, I absolutely support it.
I'm going to ask a trick question.
Sure.
It's not a trick question, but you mentioned power of the people, and this is something that I struggle with term limits on. Does term limits restrict the legislatures more, or does it restrict the people more?
So, I think in our first interview, I had mentioned how I can see the side where, voters say, okay, well, my vote should matter, and if you're going to kind of take that away. So I can see that side of it, where they want there to feel like I do have power over my vote. But at the same time, I think things are kind of changing, where people are actually more open to new people stepping forward and running and saying, okay, well, now this actually forces people to think a little bit differently. It's, I do see the side of it where they feel like that's being restricted, but I think if people think about it, well, if they were wanting to run and this is what they were up against, I think they would maybe have a little bit of a different perspective on that. But I could see both sides of it. I can see that. Yeah.
Last measure we'll go over, measure 5, legalizing recreational marijuana. Obviously a big change in there. And the bill is written, I've talked with Republicans and like, yeah, this is something that I would support. And I know that it's kind of a bipartisan deal. It's not really specific to a party on who would support it. But what's your view on it?
I would support it for
economic growth. Is that why? No, I
tease. Yes, economic growth. I am one of those people that really do believe that it would help. I think it would bring in revenue just right off of taxes alone, but it would also bring people in that want to start their business in North Dakota. Montana gets a huge percentage of money from that from North Dakotans. So why would we not want to have that for ourselves? Yeah. But so sure, there's the economic side of things that I do agree with. But in terms of, well, this is probably something everyone hears me talk a lot about. Is the comparison between cannabis and alcohol. I don't feel like you can really compare the two when you talk about long-term health risks and crime rates and stuff that happens in families in terms of like domestic violence, child neglect. Alcohol by far is more dangerous physically, and it has a quicker response to the body, and it's tied a lot to DUIs and deaths from DUIs. And I don't understand how, of course, we're never going to ban alcohol. That's never going to happen. There's too much of
at this point,
money into it, the industry. It's never going to happen. But
would you be for that?
Would I be?
In this never going to happen world.
I mean, I would be. That's tough.
It'd be hard to ban alcohol, I think, at this point.
Right now, I think people need to have another legal option. Yeah. When alcohol is the only one that is legal, and let's quite frankly, it is very glamorized, and so it's pretty accepted in society. But when you look at all of the car crashes, the people getting hit, I don't understand the pushback on cannabis. You don't see people smoking weed, driving, and hitting somebody and killing people. Statistically, there's no comparison. Alcohol by far is tied to a lot of different community issues. So I am going to support this one, absolutely.
Very good. Well, we are coming towards the end of this. And you mentioned that you view yourself as a moderate Democrat. And so what would you say to someone that's maybe close to center Republican? You have you're in a conservative district. I was going through stats last night, and I got to 2,000. And after that, the Secretary of State website stats, they're not very good.
Right.
And a couple elections, it was within under 1,000 votes, and that's about as close as the Democrat candidate has gotten in the last 25 years.
Yep.
What would you say to someone that's close to center Republican that would consider voting for you? Why is that reason why they should do it?
Do something different. If you want balance and you want a Democrat that can work with both sides, and I am very public about this. I really want to hold both sides accountable. I want both sides to get together and get to a point where we can work together. Voters have said that the legislature worked better when there was a balance in there. And on both sides, they agree. It's when you have 16 Democrats representing North Dakota and 125 Republicans, too much of one thing is not good. It's not constructive. It's not conducive. And I tell voters, do something different. Give it a shot. and give me the opportunity to show that I can get things done and work with Republicans. Give me that opportunity to prove that we can do this, that having this representation is going to be healthy and something that we haven't had in so many years. Think over the last 20 years. How has the supermajority really helped you? How has it helped your neighbor? How has it changed things for the better? And if you have that slight feeling inside of you that, you know what, this is just not really working. I would like to see something different. You know, you have the option. You could vote for just me if you wanted. You could vote for me and Christina Wolf, or me and Dan Ruby, and you would have someone that, like we've both said, a moderate but could get things done, and to go with your instinct. You know, if something's there that's telling you, you know what, I really appreciate a lot of the values that Lisa Hermosillo has, I'm going to give her a shot. I'm going to vote for her. That would be what I would say.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you all for watching this virtual town hall. Appreciate the questions that did come in. Appreciate Wyatt giving a shout out to his mom. We'll let her go here soon so you can see her. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Become part of the Dakotan community. We'd love to have you join us as we continue to create conversations around Minot. Thank you for watching this virtual town hall, and have a great evening.